All right, get ready, because we're diving into some seriously trippy, like seriously strange stuff in the Bible.
Oh, yeah. We're talking
We're talking Ezekiel chapters 1 through 3.
some wild imagery.
We got four-faced creatures,
Wheels within wheels.
throne rooms straight out of Star Wars.
But, it's not just about the spectacle, right?
Yeah.
There's some deep, deep theological truth hiding in all this wild
Oh,
imagery.
absolutely. So let's set the scene a little bit.
Okay.
We're in the 6th century BCE. Ezekiel, he's a priest, living in exile with the Israelites in Babylon.
Tough times.
Tough times. And he has this just incredible vision by the Shabar River.
Not exactly a peaceful setting.
No, not at all. I mean, he describes a whirlwind, fire flashing back and forth, and out of this chaos come these 4 living creatures.
Yeah, and these aren't your typical angels.
No.
Each one has 4 faces: man, lion, ox, and an eagle. Right? Think about all that symbolism.
Yeah.
Man, intelligence, lion, strength, ox, service, and eagle, that soaring vision.
Oh, I never thought of it like that. Putting it all together like that.
It's almost like God's, like a composite sketch of God's nature,
Okay, but they're not just standing around, right?
No, you're moving.
Yeah.
They got these crazy wheels within wheels, and get this. Everything, the creatures, the wheels, covered in eyes.
Yeah, you're definitely being watched.
Oh, yeah, that's the point, right?
Right.
Eyes everywhere.
God's always watching.
Omniscience, God seeing everything. And remember, these people, they're in exile, they're feeling lost and forgotten.
Right.
So this is a powerful message for them, like, hey, God sees you.
It's like those neighborhood watch programs.
Uh-huh.
But, cosmic scale.
Cosmic scale, exactly.
Yeah, but hold on, because it gets even crazier.
Oh, yeah.
Out of this
Yeah.
scene, out of this already insane scene comes, like, God's throne.
The text describes it as the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. So try to picture this, right?
Okay.
Radiant light, it's almost blinding, swirling colors, a sound like rolling thunder.
I think if I saw that, I would just,
It'd be overwhelming.
I would turn around and go the other way.
Ezekiel's trying to convey this awe-inspiring, almost terrifying power of God.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah, and it's revealing God's character in a powerful way.
Absolutely. So, okay, he's seen all this.
It's just the beginning, chapter 2, things shift.
Okay.
It goes from this awe-inspiring spectacle to a personal call. God speaks directly to Ezekiel,
Okay.
calls him Son of Man, emphasizing his humanity, and says, I am sending you.
Sending him where? Like, what's next? What could be next after all that?
He's being sent to the Israelites, his own people, with a message that's, well, let's just say it's not going to win him any popularity contests.
Okay.
God gives him a scroll, and it's filled with lamentations, mourning, and woe to deliver.
Oof. So, like, this is not going to be easy.
No, it's not going to be a walk in the park. It's clear from the outset that Ezekiel's prophetic journey is going to be challenging.
So he's basically being sent in to say, like, hey, bad news, it's going to get worse. Yeah, pretty much.
And these people are already in exile. They're already feeling abandoned.
Demoralized.
Yeah, it's like being told you failed your driving test and then they take away your car.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And God knows that this is going to be challenging for Ezekiel.
Yeah.
Which is why he specifically tells him, don't be afraid.
Right.
And you got to remember, prophets, they weren't just, predicting the weather or giving stock tips.
Right.
They were challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
Speaking truth to power. And often facing serious consequences for doing so.
Yeah, that takes guts.
Uh-huh. It's like those whistleblowers today, they risk their careers, their reputations, even their safety to expose corruption, to do what's right.
Yeah, they know the message isn't going to be well received, but they feel like they have to speak up anyway.
Absolutely, that moral obligation.
So does Ezekiel, does he just accept this mission? Does he push back at all?
Well, that's where chapter 3 comes in.
Yeah.
And it introduces this really interesting concept of the Watchman. Okay, the Watchman. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that. What's that all about?
All right, so picture a guard up on a city wall,
Okay.
constantly scanning the horizon, looking for any sign of danger.
Okay.
Their job isn't to fight the enemy,
Right.
but to alert the people inside the city if trouble is brewing.
Okay.
That's Ezekiel's role.
Okay.
He's a watchman for Israel, tasked with warning them about the coming judgment.
Okay, so he's kind of like a spiritual lookout,
Yeah.
warning people about the consequences of their actions.
Right.
But let's be honest, nobody likes a Debbie Downer, right?
True.
So how's he going to get people to actually listen? you know?
Well, this is where things take a really interesting turn.
Yeah.
See, his job isn't just about like passively watching and reporting.
Right.
He's given a much more like active and honestly kind of bizarre task.
Okay.
He's told to eat the scroll.
Eat it, like actually eat it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know prophets were known for being dramatic, but
That's a bit much.
that seems a little extreme.
Yeah, it's one of those moments in the Bible where you gotta pause and ask,
Mhm.
okay, what's the deeper meaning here?
Yeah.
And the key is to understand this as a metaphor.
Okay.
So he's being told to internalize God's message,
Okay.
make it a part of himself
Hmm.
before he can share it with others.
So it's not enough to just know it. He has to really like absorb it.
Yes, exactly.
Let it kind of like nourish him.
You know, to become a part of who he is. It's like
Mhm.
that saying, you can't give what you don't have.
It makes you think about like how we approach learning and sharing information today.
Absolutely.
Are we really taking the time to digest what we're reading, what
Mhm.
we're, watching, listening to?
Yeah, good question.
Are we letting it shape our values, our beliefs? Or are we just skimming the surface? Like
Right.
information junkies.
Addicted to the next headline?
Yeah, addicted to the next headline, but never really internalizing anything.
Exactly. It's so easy to get caught up in that constant flow of information. I feel like you got to have an opinion on everything.
Right. And it's like, are we really letting any of it sink in?
Right. It's like stuffing yourself with junk food,
Yeah.
but never getting any real nourishment.
And I think Ezekiel's experience challenges us to be more intentional about how we consume information.
Yes.
It's not about the speed.
It's not about the quantity.
It's about the depth.
It's about the depth and the integration, right?
Yeah.
It's about letting that knowledge transform us from the inside out so that when we share it,
Right.
it comes from a place of genuine understanding and conviction.
So it's not about preaching. It's not about lecturing.
Right.
It's about sharing from a place of having really wrestled with these ideas. Let them become a part of you.
Exactly. And I think that's where the idea of faithfulness comes in, which is so central to these opening chapters of Ezekiel.
Okay.
It's not just about delivering the message.
Uh,
It's about delivering it faithfully, even when it's hard, even when people don't want to hear it, even when it feels like you're shouting into the void.
because at the end of the day, his responsibility is to God, not to people's response.
Exactly.
His job is to be obedient to the call.
Yeah,
Be a faithful messenger, regardless of the outcome.
right.
It's like planting a seed.
Mhm.
You can nurture it, water it, but you can't force it to grow.
Right. You got to trust.
You got to trust that it's going to do what it's meant to do.
Beautiful analogy.
And it brings us to another really important aspect of these chapters. God's sovereignty.
Yeah. Big theme.
Even though he's called to be a watchman, to warn people,
Yeah.
ultimately God's in control.
Right.
But doesn't that kind of create a paradox?
Hmm.
Like, if God already knows what's going to happen,
Yeah.
why even bother sending a prophet?
Right.
Like, what's the point of all this warning if the outcome's already decided?
You've hit on one of the great mysteries of faith, the tension between free will and divine sovereignty.
That's a big one.
It is. We could probably spend a whole deep dive just unpacking that.
Yeah, let's save that for another time.
Absolutely.
But for now, maybe we can focus on what these chapters tell us about God's character.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think what we see is a God who is both powerful
Right.
and compassionate,
Right.
just and merciful.
Yeah.
He longs for his people to return to him, but he also respects their choices, even when those choices lead to consequences.
So it's not like he's this, puppet master
Right.
forcing people to act against their will.
No, free will is key.
He's giving them a choice, a chance to turn back to him.
Mm.
But there are real consequences.
Like a parent setting boundaries for a child.
Right. And it's not to control them.
Exactly.
It's to protect them, to help them grow.
And I think it's important to remember that God's judgment isn't about punishment.
Okay.
It's about consequences.
Right.
It's about the natural outworking of choices, good and bad.
So even in the midst of all these warnings,
Yeah.
pronouncements of doom, there's still this sense of hope. Like things could be different
Yeah. Absolutely. That potential for change is always there.
if people choose to change.
Right. If they choose a different path.
But wait, you said earlier that God told Ezekiel not to be afraid?
Yeah.
Why would he even need to say that?
Well, think about who he's being sent to. These aren't exactly a welcoming audience.
Right, a rebellious nation.
A rebellious nation, as the text says.
Yeah.
They're not going to be thrilled to hear his message.
Yeah.
They're likely to be hostile, maybe even violent.
It's like telling a group of toddlers it's bedtime.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. So God's reassurance, it's not just about physical safety. It's
Right.
about emotional and spiritual fortitude.
Okay.
It's about giving Ezekiel that courage to stand firm, to speak the truth,
Even when it's hard.
even when it's unpopular, even when it puts him at risk.
It takes a lot of bravery to do that.
A special kind of bravery.
Yeah, the kind that's not about, like, not being afraid. It's about acting in spite of fear.
Right.
Speaking of bravery, let's talk about how Ezekiel actually responds to all this. Does he, like, jump right in, eager to get started?
Well,
Or does he, drag his feet a little?
let's just say he's not exactly a poster child for enthusiastic volunteering.
Okay.
He's a priest, not a rabble-rouser.
Right.
He's used to performing rituals, not delivering fiery sermons.
Right.
So his initial reaction is, well, let's just say he needs a bit of convincing.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, who hasn't felt a little hesitant?
When faced with a challenging task.
It's like when your boss asks you to lead a big project and you're thinking, are you sure you have the right person?
Yeah, exactly.
But I think Ezekiel's reluctance, it actually makes his eventual obedience all the more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's not blind faith.
Right.
It's a choice, a conscious decision.
Right.
To trust God, to step out in faith, even when he doesn't fully understand.
So it's not about having all the answers or feeling totally qualified.
Yeah.
It's about that willingness to say yes.
Yeah, to trust in God's guidance and to step out in faith, even when it feels scary, even when it feels uncertain.
But how does this relate back to this whole, like, Watchman idea?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think the key connection is being a watchman isn't just about seeing what's wrong.
Okay.
It's about being willing to do something about it.
Okay.
It's about taking action,
Right.
being a force for good,
Yeah.
even when it's difficult, even when you're afraid.
So it's not just about pointing fingers and saying, hey, look at all the bad stuff happening.
Right.
It's about, okay, what can I do to make things better?
Precisely. And that action, it can take many different forms,
Yeah.
It might involve speaking out against injustice, advocating for those who are marginalized,
Right.
working to protect the environment, or simply just being a kind and compassionate presence
Right.
in your everyday interactions.
So, like, we're all called to be watchmen, but maybe in different ways.
Yes, in our own unique ways.
We all have a responsibility to use our gifts, our talents, our voices to, like, make a difference.
Yeah, it's like we've each been given a piece of the puzzle.
Right.
And it's up to us to figure out where our piece fits and how we can contribute to that bigger picture.
And that brings us back to that message of hope
Yes.
we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely.
Even in the midst of exile, even in the face of judgment, there's always the possibility of renewal, transformation, turning back to God, and finding a path forward.
Beautiful. And that path, it might not always be easy.
Right.
It might not always be clear, but we can trust
Yeah.
that God is with us every step of the way, guiding us, strengthening us, and empowering us to be those watchmen
Yeah.
that he's called us to be.
It's amazing, going through these first chapters of Ezekiel, how emotionally intense it all is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this isn't just some, abstract theology. It's like a personal journal almost.
Right. Very raw, very personal.
Of this guy wrestling with a really big calling.
Absolutely. And Ezekiel, he's not just, reciting lines, going through the motions. He's deeply affected by what he's experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
He's told to lament, to mourn, to really feel the weight of this message he's carrying.
You ever wonder, like, what it must have been like to be him?
Oh, absolutely.
They have that vision, that responsibility.
I mean, talk about a mix of emotions.
Yeah, like awe, fear, even a little resentment. Like, really, God, you picked me.
And that's what makes him so relatable, so human.
Right.
He's not this like stoic, unflinching prophet, He's struggling,
Yeah.
questioning, and yet he chooses to obey.
And that makes it so powerful, right?
Absolutely.
It's not blind faith. It's a choice
A conscious decision,
to trust, even when it's hard.
even when it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful message
It is.
for all of us.
Yeah, we don't have to have it all figured out.
Right.
We don't need perfect faith, unwavering confidence.
Yeah, what matters is, are we willing to take that step?
To say yes.
Yeah, to say yes to what we're being called to do, even if it's scary.
Even when it's uncertain.
And I think that's where the Watchman idea kind of comes full circle.
Right.
It's not enough to just see what's wrong or even to understand it.
Yeah.
It's about actually doing something about it.
Taking action.
Yeah, being a force for good, even when it's hard.
And that action, it can look like so many different things.
Right. It's not always going to be the same for everybody.
Exactly. It might be speaking out against injustice. volunteering,
Yeah, standing up for someone.
being kind
Right, even just being kind.
in your everyday life.
Yeah, so even though, you know, we're probably not going to have visions of four-faced creatures
Probably not.
or eat scrolls,
Definitely not.
we can still be watchmen in our own way, right?
Absolutely.
Still play a part in making things better.
That's the beauty of it. We all have a role to play. We all have something to contribute. And I think that's the ultimate message of hope.
Right.
In Ezekiel, even in exile, even when facing judgment, there's always the possibility
Of renewal.
of transformation, of turning back to God, finding that path forward.
Well, this has been an amazing journey,
It has.
exploring these opening chapters of Ezekiel with you.
I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we've seen strange creatures, crazy metaphors, and some really deep truths
A lot to think about.
about God, humanity, and this whole idea of calling.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, there's so much more to explore in this book.
So keep diving deeper, keep wrestling with these ideas,
Keep asking those questions.
and keep looking for those moments where you're being called to be a watchman in your own life.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Ezekiel. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep exploring.
The depths of faith and understanding